Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Crawford and it's a pleasure to be here with you. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in presentation and communication skills training for over 20 years. And I've worked across Australian industry from banking and finance and professional services and IT and telecommunications and mining and manufacturing and FMCG and retail, right across, helping people to feel more comfortable and calm and relaxed and effective in all their daily meetings and presentations, whether that be small-scale one-on-one client meetings, team meetings, board meetings, larger conferences, and just having people feel like they can get their message across and they know precisely why they're there and feel supported with tools and techniques and systems and processes that can have them feel much more relaxed and calm and in control. And in that time, so I've worked with between 11 and 11,500 people. I've worked across not only a range of different industries, but also at all levels of the different organisations and across all different types of departments. So senior leadership teams, middle management, sales and marketing, shared services, HR, finance, IT. And the reason why I say that is because over that time I found that there are some common challenges, some common questions, some common concerns, and also some common solutions and ideas that make a difference to people almost no matter what role, no matter what kind of business that they're in. And so that's why I want to be here with you today, and that's what I'm hoping to address over this 4-part video series, is to give you some tools and some tips that are going to make a difference in your life if presenting is an important part of your world. Now, I'm particularly excited to be here with you via this technology because I've worked with corporations, large corporations, for such a very long time. And what I'm finding now via video and via audio and via online meetings and via webinars is that I can help people in small business and micro business be as supported with the same kinds of tools and skills that people have access to in larger organizations. And I've got a real passion for small business because I am a small business, and because I know that small business, I know for me, I don't always get access to, I don't have the budget, I don't have the time, I can't always find the right kind of training. So to be able to offer you this in bite-sized chunks that you can fit into your world and that can help you to overcome any challenges or difficulties is absolutely thrilling for me. I'm beyond kind of excited to be here. The other reason I'm really excited to be here with you is because sometimes in the corporate world, people don't want to be in the training. They've been nominated by their manager. It's not always the case. Most people, I think, recognise that presentation skills is an important part of their job and they want to improve in that area of their lives. But sometimes they don't want to be, or it's very challenging or confronting to be there live. And of course, this is a little less challenging, but you wouldn't be here if you didn't already know that presentation skills was important to you. You know, once upon a time, before I had my son, I used to ride a motorbike, and I had to learn motorbike skills in a very structured and formal way because I didn't grow up on a farm on dirt bikes and quad bikes and naturally around motorbikes. And so I had to go out and learn it in a very kind of official way. And so I went to training, and in the training I learned the basics. I learned how to manage and handle a bike, and so accelerating and braking and cornering and all of those things. But what was interesting is that after I did the training and I got my license, I had to go out onto the road, of course, that was the point of the exercise. And I got out onto the road, and of course there are a whole lot of other skills that had been discussed, or some of which had been discussed in the original training, but they couldn't really teach us in any formal manner. And they were things, I would loosely kind of group them under the heading of roadcraft. And so it was knowing where everything else was on the road, the other cars and the trucks. It was noticing where the lanes were merging up ahead. It's getting used to narrower and more winding roads in the hills, looking out for the gravel on the corners, your positioning in the lane. All these broader skills that were life or death as far as riding a motorbike goes, and yet are considered secondary, not primary perhaps in a teaching sense. And I say that because so often at university, we are taught our primary trade or our primary profession. So whether it will be something from being an electrician or a plumber through to being a doctor or a lawyer, being in marketing, accounting, finance, business, all of these skills we learn at university or in our tertiary education. And yet we go into the real world, we go into business, and we find there's a bunch of secondary skills that aren't necessarily trained in university, but are absolutely as critical to our success and our effectiveness in the role as our primary tools. And they're things like organisation and time management and negotiation and influence and presentation skills. These types of skills we find out very quickly. Not only do we need to learn in a hurry, but they're going to make or break our success and our effectiveness in our role. And so we learn those over time with experience, but what a blessing if we could shortcut some of that learning. And that's the other reason why I'm so excited to be here with you, is the opportunity to shortcut some of that experience with some tips and some techniques and some processes and systems that will help you do this much more quickly and get confident and comfortable and effective much more quickly than having to dedicate 20 years of experience into the process. So let's get stuck into it and let's have a look at what I would consider to be probably the top 10 questions or challenges that people throw to me really regularly in a webinar. Well, in our webinars, but also in our live workshops. And so here are the top 10 questions. The first one that comes up most frequently is, how do I formulate a powerful presentation that sells? Because we all know at some level that we are needing to sell our product, our service, our idea, our recommendation, a course of action. There really is no such thing as information for the sake of information in the business world. There is always an element of persuasion and influence. And how do we do that effectively? Because just talking through the content often isn't enough to genuinely persuade someone. There are some specific techniques we need to bring into play to make it persuasive and influential. The second question I get asked incredibly commonly is, I have a really dry topic. How do I bring that dry topic to life? How do I make it sexy? How do I make it appealing? How do I make it interesting? I'm in governance or compliance or accounting or finance or superannuation or whatever your technical area is, IT, and how do I make that interesting for people who don't have that same kind of background? IT people are interested in IT content, but I often have to take my IT content or my finance content to the rest of the organisation, and their passion is marketing or sales or business or something else instead, strategy. And how do I make this interesting for them? And then the third question that I'm getting much more frequently by way of webinars now that I am working with small business is, how do I know that I'm getting the right angle and I'm going to appeal to the right audience? How do I even choose my correct target audience and focus my content for the people who I'm going to be speaking with in a way that's engaging for them? So I want to tackle those top 3 questions via these first 3 videos. And then what I'd like to do in the 4th video, because we can't set up videos for every single one of these questions, but I want to give you some more generic ideas and secrets and principles and processes that are going to hold you in good stead across all your future presentations. So please stick around for that 4th video. So let's get stuck straight into it, and let's start to talk about this very first topic, which is, how do I formulate a powerful presentation that sells? And in the name of formulation, we have a formula, and our formula is our map. I'm going to give you a roadmap for formulating a powerful sales presentation. And there are 3 elements that we'll explore. Let's talk about our mission, the first part of the map. The M of the map is for mission, getting clear about our message and what's the purpose and what's the point and what am I really trying to get across here. What is my sales message? What is it I'm selling? What angle am I selling? What recommendation am I selling? So we'll focus on that in a moment. We'll move on to explore the arc, the story arc, the story of logic, of the content, the flow of information. And then finally, we'll look at how do we put together our persuasive case to prove that message inside this story of logic. What are the elements we need to include that are going to make it persuasive? What kind of proof are we going to need to include? So let's start with this idea of the message and the mission. And every single presentation we have has a point. Of course it has a point. Why would we be there if there is no point? What is the point that we want to make for the audience? What's really the reason we are there? We need a purpose, we need a focus, and we need to get really clear because we've got this wealth of information, all this data, all this experience, all this content we could include, and we need to take that wildfire of information and hone it in and become really focused so that we create like a welding flame effect and we get really powerful and really intensely focused on the outcome we want to achieve in this presentation, this meeting. Even if it's only a 5-minute contribution to a meeting, what's the point of that contribution? And there's a formula for that. And the formula is as easy as ABC. Action plus benefit, A plus B equals C. We're coming up with our conclusion, our clear, concise, and compelling final conclusion. So we're starting with the end in mind, and we're getting clear about what's that final conclusion, what's the point I want to make at the end. I'm going to plan that at the beginning. It's going to be the first thing I plan, but it will be the last thing I actually say on the day. So let's go through these components. And as we do it, what I'd like you to do is think about a presentation you've got coming up, something that you need to make in the near future, next week, next month. It may be small, it may be larger, and let's start to implement this process for that presentation. So the first part of the formula is the A for action. What is it that I want this individual, maybe it's only a one-on-one meeting, or this group of people, to think or to do as a result of the information I'm giving them today? So most of the time we're asking people to do something. We're asking them to implement a process, we're asking them for resources, we're asking them for information, we're asking them for cooperation. We're asking them to communicate this message on to their teams. So we're invariably asking people to do something as a result of this content. So what specifically are we asking them to do? Now there is an exception, and the exception is where we're asking people to think something rather than do something. And the kind of example I'm thinking of there is where it's a work in progress meeting. And you're just updating your team on what it is that you're doing at the moment. Now, there's nothing for them to do about that, but there is something you want them to think. And I want you to get very specific about what is it that you want them to think about this, that you're on track, that it's under control, that you will be contributing your part to the bottom line if you're talking about sales projections, for instance. So what is the point that you want them to take away? What is it you want them to think or to do? But I am going to push back for a moment and say we are always asking people to think or to do something. Otherwise, why are you there? Sometimes I'll have someone say to me in a workshop, but this is just an information presentation. And I always push back a little bit on that and I'll say, but why? Why are you giving them the information? Well, they just need to know what we do in our department. Why do they need to know what you do in your department? Well, because they're interacting with us. Okay, well, how are they interacting and why do they need this information you've been tasked with talking about? Well, because they need to know how to work more effectively with us. Now we're getting somewhere. Great. Now we realise that this is about how can we work more effectively together to create outcomes in a more streamlined and efficient manner. Fantastic. That's the point. So this is already leading us naturally, if you can see, into the second part, which is the B. The B is the benefit. Why should they think or do what you're suggesting? If you're asking them for information, for instance, then why should they take time out of their life and effort in their life to collate that information for you, to gather that information for you, and to give that information to you? So what's the benefit to them in thinking or doing what you're suggesting? And this is like the overriding benefit. So is it going to make their life more efficient in the long run? So if we're asking them to implement a new system, a new process, then what's the benefit to them in the long run, or to the business, or to the customer, for instance? So what's the overriding benefit to them, the business, the customer, their clients? What's the difference it's going to make for them that they care about? So writing down, I want you to be doing this. Have a think about your upcoming presentation or your upcoming meeting and give some thought to what is it that you really want them to think or to do as a result of your content, and why should they? What's the overriding benefit to them in doing this? And then we're going to piece it together, those two answers, we're going to piece together into a one-sentence message that is like the bottom line for what we're focused on today. It's the purpose. So it's going to be something like an if-then statement or a by-then statement. So if we do this, then you'll achieve that. Or by doing this, we'll achieve that. Yeah, not we, but we as a group, or you'll achieve that. You want the benefit to be to them, not to you. So if then. So if I'm making a presentation to you now about why you should implement a one-sentence message and do this at the outset of your preparation every single time that you're preparing for a presentation or a contribution to a meeting, I would say this: if you write this one-sentence message every single time that you are preparing for a meeting or a presentation, you will feel much more focused and clear and supported in your preparation process, and the audience will walk away with a very clear and tangible takeaway, knowing precisely what the point is for them. So there's my if-then statement. If you write this one-sentence message, your audience will walk away knowing precisely what the point was for them. Too often we go to meetings and we hear a lot of data and we walk away going, I don't really know what the point of all of that was for me, why I was even invited to this meeting. And so I don't want that to be the case for your audiences. I want you to have the reputation of, every time I come to one of your meetings, I know that there's going to be a point, I know there's going to be a reason, there's going to be a purpose for me as the audience, as the listener. And the way we do that is by writing this one-sentence message. So give it a go, have a go at moulding together. If they do this, then they'll achieve that. But write it in with the word you. If you do this, then that. Yes? Because it's for them that we're writing this message. So let's move on, and let's now move to talk about the story arc, the A of our map, the arc, the story of logic. And this doesn't have a formula. This is a matter of taking an educated guess at what you think is going to be the most logical sequence to the headings that are going to make up your presentation. So this is fundamentally coming up with an agenda. 3 or 4 key headings in some sort of logical sequence that feels comfortable for you. Now, what I'm going to do here is give you a number of examples and talk through those examples, because I think that's the easiest way to get a handle on what typical agendas look like. But please be aware there's many different and varied types of agendas. If I was talking about why we should go to a restaurant down the road, I might talk about the food, the service, and the location. If I wanted to talk about going to Bali for a holiday, we could talk about the weather, the activities, and the cost. So there's going to be different agenda for every single presentation we're involved in. They could be set up as questions. Why are we doing this? What's the solution? How are we going to go about that? It could be set up for persuasion. What's the problem we're addressing? What's the solution that I'm proposing? What are the benefits of that solution? Time frame is common, looking at what have we done in the past, where are we at now, and where's this going in the future? What needs to happen next? Occasionally we need to look at it from a zoom perspective, looking in at the impact and the implementation from the local perspective, the national perspective, and zooming out to the global perspective. Differentiation is common. I've come across this fairly regularly, where we need to differentiate ourselves from our competitors from the point of view of our philosophy, our methodology, how's that different, and how is our implementation different from our competitors. Or a classic business case might be along the lines of looking at the rationale first, again, leading with the need. What's the rationale? The options, the pros and cons of the options that we've looked at. The cost of doing nothing. We want the cost of doing nothing, of course, to be greater than the cost of doing something, and we need to look at what that something should be. And then, of course, we want to acknowledge the risks and put forward a risk mitigation plan. So our story of logic is about creating a sequence for ourselves, breaking things down into 3 or 4 bite-sized chunks that makes it easy for you to follow your own story of logic on the day, but also makes it very easy for the audience to know where we're up to at any point in time and where are we going. So the same way we said, you plan your 1-sentence message at the beginning, but you say it at the end of the presentation. You are now planning the agenda as your second step of the planning process. You'll say it at the beginning of the presentation so people know, or towards the beginning of the presentation beyond an introduction, so people know where you're going. You may even put a slide up for that agenda to show them the story arc and where things are going. Okay, so we've got our mission, we've got our purpose, we know exactly where we're going, we've got a focus, that's our 1-sentence message. We've got our story arc, we know broadly the topics we're going to be covering, those 3 or 4 or 5 major headings that need to be covered along the way, and now we're going to populate it with some detail and with some proof that makes it convincing that we know we can deliver with conviction, and that they're going to get some substance, something solid that makes it real and makes it persuasive. Remember, we're formulating a powerful presentation that sells. We need it to be persuasive. So let's have a look. This is our 6 by 6 by 6 ideas. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly, because there's potentially a lot of substance here that we could go through, but I want to give you some broad principles and ideas to trigger some thoughts. So again, I want you to be thinking about a presentation that you're working on, and as we go through these, take some notes about your presentation, and as I say something, quickly jot it down. Oh, that's an idea that I can implement into my presentation. Let me just take a quick note of that as we go through it. So the first 6 that we're going to put up on the screen are Robert Cialdini's 6 laws or principles of persuasion. So really powerful book that was written some decades ago now, but has become kind of like the mantra of many people in the sales industry and marketing for that matter. So let's have a look at these 6 laws of persuasion. The law of reciprocity says that if we can do something for people in advance, they are more likely and more willing to open up to hear what we have to say and to give it a go. So can we offer them a free sample? Can we offer them a half-price discount? Can we do something for them in advance, a favor for them in advance? Similarly, with the law of commitment and consistency, if people are able to try in some small measured way, they are more likely, in the name of congruence and consistency, to follow through to the second step and beyond. So can you break it down into smaller chunks and offer them an opportunity to trial in some sort of risk-free fashion that allows them then to follow through and commit further? The laws of social proof and authority are quite similar, inasmuch as if we see our peers using a similar product or similar system and having success with it, those peers might be individuals we know, the authority might be someone well known in the industry, it may well be other organisations in the same industry as ours, or similar sized organisations in different industries. Are you able to quote that best practice, and who else is using that, and what results are they achieving? The law of liking, of course, says that we buy from, as you would know, people we like. We buy from and we are influenced by people who we like. And we'll talk about this more in our 3rd video, where we talk about the need to be authentic and to be real and to be natural when we are presenting, to not put on a face and not put on a front, because people connect with and engage with people they like and who are real and human. And then finally, the law of scarcity. Is there, again, authentically, a scarcity around the opportunity here, the timeline or the number of products available? Any kind of scarcity, of course, increases the value of what you're offering. So those are our 6 laws of persuasion. So look for opportunities to include any of those that feel relevant and appropriate for your presentation. Let's move on to talk about the 6 benefits and also the 6 critical proof points that you may want to include in your presentation. So the 6 benefits that you need to be aware of and that you want to include throughout your presentation. Wherever you can find an opportunity, you want to focus on the benefits to your audience. What difference is this going to make to them? So the benefits are, in what way is this going to help them to either make money or maybe save money? Will it save them time, increase efficiencies in some way? Is it going to help them look good, for instance, be more confident, or is it a good purchasing decision that's going to reflect well on them? Is it going to help them feel good in some way, feel more confident? Is it a well-being? Is there a peace of mind associated with this? Or is it going to help them feel secure? Is it reducing risks in some way? So have a look for, just jot down again, any of those benefits that stand out for you as obvious or maybe more subtle benefits that you can include that you can refer to in your presentation throughout your presentation. Scatter them, refer to the benefits from time to time throughout, and then you may have a heading, as we did in our story arc, that's specifically devoted to the benefits where you can flesh them out in more detail. Finally, let's have a look at 6 critical proof points. So we will talk in the next video a little bit about how we differentiate empirical from anecdotal evidence. And in the next video, we'll talk a lot about anecdotal evidence that helps to bring difficult or tough or dry or technical content to life. So what we're going to focus on here as part of our proof is making sure we've got solid empirical evidence. Now that's the hard data, that's the facts and the figures and the statistics and the graphs and the scatter graphs and the Gantt charts and the bar graphs and all of those things. It's our calculations and it's the hard stuff that makes it real and makes us understand to what degree this is genuinely based in something of substance. So let's have a look at those 6 critical proof points. Those are going to include things like the cost-benefit analysis. So what's the upfront cost and then what are the benefits, both soft and hard benefits, we're going to accrue as a result of making this change or implementing this idea or taking on this product or service? What's the return on investment? Of course, that's expressed as a percentage of the original investment. Where's the break-even point? If you're bringing in a new system or a new process, it may take a year or 2 before it pays off because of the amount of time and energy and cost involved in implementing it up front. Capital equipment, for instance, or IT systems. What's the opportunity cost? We've already talked about this, the cost of doing nothing. What if we don't do it and all our competitors are getting on board with this? So what's the opportunity cost? Look for an opportunity to include that in your presentation. What's been the research process and the results? Has there been focus groups? Has there been some sort of survey done? What have been the results of those? Include those, of course, in the presentation. And sales projections and, of course, the assumptions on which those sales projections are based. Why are you thinking you might achieve those numbers? What's that based on? What new tools are you bringing into play that's going to make a difference this quarter over next quarter? Why do we think these sales projections are achievable? Okay, so that's our 6 by 6 by 6. We've got the 6 laws of a persuasive case from Robert Cialdini. We've talked about the 6 benefits and we've talked about the 6 critical proof points that we want to include in our presentation. So what have we covered overall here today? We've talked about our mission, getting very clear about our message, the action plus benefit to create the conclusion. So what's really the point of the exercise? Why are we there? Articulate that very, very clearly. Then we talked about the A from the map, the story arc. What's the arc? What's the story arc? The sequence of logic the headings will be covering. And finally, what's the proof? Making sure we substantiate it with some proof points. So it's a pleasure being here with you. Please put these ideas into action. Get in contact with me, email me. I'm keen to hear how you go, and if you're having any challenges or difficulties, I would love to be in email contact with you, and I'm really happy to help you find a way to implement this for your presentation. I'll look forward to seeing you in the very next video where we're going to be talking about how we bring our tough topics to life. I'll look forward to seeing you then. All the best for now. Bye-bye.